Welcome to They Learn, You Win, the podcast from Skooks. I'm your host, David Wentworth, and today's guest is Matthew Meyers. He's the Global Talent and Learning Manager for Western Union. He's also part of the adjunct faculty at the University of Denver Frontline Manager Leadership Program. In this episode, Matthew brings with him all of his experience delivering business impact with L&D and coaching so that we can discuss treating L&D like a business so that it can be more strategic and a much better partner to the organization. We get into discussions around the shift from order taker to problem solver. We talk about how to act like a business owner, even the power of influence and storytelling. So let's get into the episode. So Matthew, thank you so much for joining me today. We're going to talk about something that just is a constant conversation I'm having everywhere I go, every phone call, every webinar. This comes up to some degree, this idea of, the business of learning, right? Treating learning as a business, being more strategic, all these things. So I can't wait to sort of get into that with you. But I do want you to give people an opportunity to understand a little bit more about Western Union, what you guys do, and what your role is there.
Yeah, Western Union is just an amazing company. If you think about a company that's lasted over 170 years, just the innovation in and of itself that's baked into that is inspiring, right? And so we're always changing, we're always doing things, and we're really just helping people prosper and live out, they're the best versions of themselves by helping money transfers, be possible for people, and whether that's locally or internationally, and just being there and being a partner. I love what we're doing right now from a development standpoint as well. I mean, I worked for T-Mobile for 16 years, and that was huge. We really invested in our learning. We took it seriously. We invested in our learning development and our leadership development. This is the first company that I've worked for that's taking it equally as seriously. We really do take investments. We take time, and it allows me the opportunity to act as a business owner with, thinking about what we can bring forward to our front line. So it's been really exciting and inspiring.
That's great. I think I will say over my career as an analyst, T-Mobile would always come up as sort of in the forefront of learning. So I'm really, excited that you were part of that when
Mhm.
that was happening. And then as far as the brand of Western Union, I just anecdotally, I've been rewatching Mad Men, and
Oh,
there's
yeah.
an episode around them, pitching Western Union. So talk about an iconic brand, right?
Really?
Uh,
Yeah.
so that's really cool. Yeah, so thanks so much. Again, I'm excited to have you because I talk about this so much with so many people, and I'm excited to talk to you because you're someone who takes these thoughts and concepts and is actually putting them into practice. And you can talk about your experience, your current role, other roles, about how this works. And the idea is, leader after leader I talk to, they recognize that learning needs to become more strategic, needs to become a partner to the business, seat at the table, all of the phrases, whatever you want to call it. And everyone agrees. I haven't met anyone that's telling me, no, we don't want to do that. I think it's the level is, okay, but how? What do I
Mhm.
do? So I know it's a huge thing and we're not going to solve it here in 40 minutes, but I think if we could just talk through some of the key concepts or ideas that you focus on when you start to think about this.
Yeah, and you think about how you can expedite that seat at the table. And my mindset's always to figure out, like, what do our executive leaders want? What do our leaders want? And if you can think about that as you're thinking about development and aligning to leveling that up, answering those, solving those problems, right? I know that I'm jumping the gun. I'm talking about a business owner, but really it is about that, right? As you
Mm,
think about being a business owner, you think about creating a new role. What you're doing is you're identifying where's that gap, where's that pain point, how do I solve that? How do I make it faster? How do I make it better? How do I even make it? And the same thing is applies when you're working from a learning development space as well. As where's the gap? And you're answering that need, and you're finding that gap, and you're filling that space, and you're helping executive leaders along that journey realize, hey, I'm helping us do this faster. I'm helping us do this even more effectively. I'm helping us get this result. Because if you can point everything to results, that's where you're going to be able to start to get expedited seats at the table, and not only have that seat at the table, but have that VIP invite to the party. Because as soon as you can start to speak that language, as soon as you can start to speak in results, they're going to want to have you there. I think that the issue that happens so often, I've been in this space for over about 25 years, and it's really easy to fall into the here's what they're asking us to do, let's do that, and that's it. And then we feel like we're busy, we feel like we're doing our role, and a lot of companies follow that same model today. That can't be where success comes from. Where it has to be is you have to be that expert. You are that expert. So instead of having them dictate what training they want, they have to articulate what problem they want solved. And then you, as the expert, get to figure that out.
Yeah, I think the role you're describing, and this has come up in a couple conversations I've had, it's sometimes I it's very easy, or at least the path of least resistance, to kind of fly under the radar by
Mhm.
doing what people are asking, right? At the end of the day, you're just like, "Well, you this is what you asked for, and we
Yeah.
delivered that." So, and I love the fact that the phrase you used when we were talking earlier was, "Start your own business," because in all the times I've been talking about this particular topic, no one has actually said that to me, and the idea is, everyone wants that seat at the table, and you can't think that, well, if we just keep doing a good job, someone's going to come
Mhm.
and they're going to walk us to the seat and sit us down and get us a glass of water. And no, it's you start your own business and make the seat. And
Mhm.
of course, that's a scary proposition, especially when things have been going the way they're going, and you don't make too many waves because you're doing what's being asked. It's hard to make that leap, I think, sometimes. But what do you see as, like, the first, I don't know, either it's a mindset shift or the actual thing you can do to try to break out of that older mindset?
Yeah, and I think where it really starts is maybe you don't start that full business by yourself. Maybe we think more of like a franchise model, right? It's already kind of working, you're doing it. So how do you elevate the current programs that are within your organization right now? That's working. There's things that are working. How can you make it even more effective? And so maybe that's the way you go about this. Instead of like proposing these new kind of innovative, different plans, it's how do you start where you're at? And in fact, wherever I start in an organization, the last thing that I do is to try to change everything, especially when I'm the head of organizations. It's a mistake. It's going to set off alarm bells. People are going to not love that. You've got to start with where you're at, and how do you start to figure out, what's working, what's not working, and start to elevate it from there. Start to make those recommendations from there, and then when they
Mhm.
can start to see, okay, that was valid. I like that. Then you can enhance that a little bit more, try
Yeah,
a little bit more, push a little bit more. Oh, and guess what? Now you're in a better position to say, let's go ahead and try this. I know that we're working towards this on this one. I think that if we implement this solution here, this is actually going to help us even more effectively. So it's kind of that tiptoe process, and I think that people who are not used to this and are more used to like kind of responding to the asks in the business, that's a good place for you to start anyway, just so you can feel comfortable.
for sure. And I think, you can't ignore the fact that, um, in that situation, like you described, you come in, new to a role, the rest of the team is almost expecting that you're gonna come change
Mhm.
things and get rid of things, and so that you're already fighting against that. So if you just
Yeah.
come in and actually do that, you're feeding into that, and then you've sort of lost this chance, to fortify the team, to build the team. So I think you're spot on about coming in and being thoughtful about, yes, things need to change, but let's focus on what's right.
Yeah. And even when you're tenured, so I think about a coaching program that I built out at T-Mobile. Fast forward, very successful. We adopted it in all 17 different call centers. We ended up rolling it out globally, and we ended up rolling it out when T-Mobile merged with Sprint. They rolled that same coaching model out at Sprint. That's not how it started. It actually started out very, very rough because while I was tasked with building out a coaching model, what I didn't do is I didn't bring people along the journey with me. So while you're going through this, while you're innovating, while you're changing things, get champions in different pockets, and so that they can be that voice for you. Because if you're the one pushing this forward, listen, first of all, politically, you're not going to be able to save yourself from everything. You're going to fall in a couple holes, but the more champions you can have strategically throughout the journey, the more they can be that voice and pulling you through the finish line. Luckily, I had enough of those that, like I said, helped me get to that where I needed to go at the end. But if I would have done that earlier, if I would have had more people, even in the collaboration process or when we were talking through things, we wouldn't have had such a mess. And there was a team that they didn't report to me. There was dotted lines where they never fully got bought in because of the jadedness of how it went about there. So champions are going to be important for you.
Yeah, especially because I would think, this is just my impression of from the conversations I've had over the years, but, Most folks in this L&D space, they're somewhat averse to whenever you mention the word political, which it's this is the
Mhm.
reality of an organization, right? Uh, Pretty averse to that, and try to actually live in a world where we feel like we're insulated from that. Not necessarily above it, but just insulated from it. But that is one of the things that is preventing
Mhm.
L&D from being able to be more of a part of the business. And yeah, I think you're right. I think the champions is one way to soften your way into that.
Yeah, especially if you can get some executive level champions and sponsors of your program. I mean, it just pays dividends with it, and it all links back to what you're trying to accomplish. And that's what I really try to inspire people to think about, whether I'm building it up for myself or if I have a team that's developing it up. The question I always ask myself, and I encourage my teams to ask, what are you trying to accomplish? Because the way you think you're going to get there isn't necessarily going to be the way that it happens. Be addicted and fixated on what you want to accomplish and be very, really, for lack of the word that I'm looking for, willing to get there in different
Oh
routes.
yeah. Yeah, the
Yeah.
flexibility has to
Yeah.
come
The
in
flexibility,
that
be
piece of it.
flexible with how you get there.
Right, not the outcomes, right?
Right.
Where it's, "No,
Exactly.
we this is
Yeah.
how we do the things, and we really hope the outcomes turn out right."
Right.
Yeah, you flip-flop that and be like, "Look, as long as we're getting the things done, this little black box of learning, we can move those pieces around as much as we need to, as long
Right.
as we're doing the thing." So, yeah, again, yeah, anytime you can get into a mindset where we've recognized what the outcomes are, we know what we need to do, and whether that is, I need literally a specific person to do a specific new thing, or the organization or team needs to do this big thing, new or different, whatever it is, figure out what that is, and then focus,
Mhm.
like you said, almost addictively
Yeah.
on whatever that is.
Right.
And it doesn't
Right.
matter how we get there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
In a
Yeah.
sense.
Right. Totally. Absolutely. I mean, you think about that even for like your personal goals in life. Have your goal, but just, there's so many different ways to get there. Some faster and some slower.
Yeah. And it's usually not either the way you've been doing it or the way you think you're doing it.
Oh my gosh, no.
So, in that spirit, coming into Western Union, if you can, and I don't know, I want to put you on spot for any detail or that you do or don't want to share, but if you could think of a couple of things as you came in where you were like, okay, here's the thing that I want to do more of, right? That thing we were talking about where, hey, let's focus on the success. Here's something that I recognize as success and I'm going to start there. And then what was something you recognize that like, I see an opportunity here to really rethink the way we do things?
I think even in what I was blessed with is a little bit of direction of like, what are some things that we're looking for and wanting to do? And like I talked about, as far as like how we're invested in our leadership,
Hmm.
even offering like new people leader onboarding programs. It didn't exist. And sadly, there was areas where I could have taken my own advice and asked more questions and put different champions in place. I think that I would have been able to do some things a little bit faster within there. And that's the thing with this. No matter how tenured you are, you're always learning. Right. And if I had to go back and do it again, I would have done it even more effectively. But it was the business mindset of, okay, what, this is a blank slate. We need this. What does this look like? And just interviewing people and asking questions and figuring out what was important and what we really wanted to accomplish, like I talked about there. And then took some time to stand that up and continue to innovate and build this out and share it out and get people excited. And there's ways I'll continue to get people excited around that. And just really kind of even leaning into where we're at in the world of like even like popular like TikToks and things like that, where people adopt it. Like, how do you get people excited about what we're doing internally, following some of that same addictive models that we see in like social media? And so that's really where the direction I'm at right now is like, okay, now I've got some things built up, based off of what I told you about my approach. Now, how do you get people excited about it? How do you continue to create those champions and that excitement with that there as well? And then just for things that I think that we could do even more effectively, I think that in all things, it's how do you make it really easy for the end user within your organization to ingest learning in the moment, what they need and how they need to do it. And so really spending some time of like making it easier, right? I think
Yeah.
that the more we can make it easier for people to take part in learning when they do it, speaking about like what we see in trends in life with social media, people don't wait. People want learning when they want learning. And so how do we make that even more effective? And so I'm scratching my head right now figuring like, oh, how can we do that? And We've got some off the shelf training that we can use, but how do I even make that into module based learning? Like maybe you don't want to wait for somebody to facilitate this. How do you take this yourself? How do you really take control of your learning and leaning into that 70-20-10?
Yeah, I think the idea, is there's always the opportunity to remove friction, right? There's always going to be some friction in anything that's happening, and even if you're doing good things and there's always an opportunity to do more. And you hit on something really important. I think is that we're all learning professionals, and so if we're not also learning, then I think we've sort of dropped the ball, right? And the cobbler's children running around with no shoes. It's we're also learning, and so everything that we're doing is also a learning opportunity. So even if as someone goes on this journey and starts doing these things, even if you feel in the moment it's being successful, the changes you're making and things that you're doing are successful, you can still look back and go, but you know what? If I did a little of this and a little of that, just like you're doing right now, you're already. I wouldn't say that anything that you've attempted so far, just in the brief time we've been talking, has been unsuccessful. But you're still sitting there going, but you know what? If I had just maybe done this and this and this, it would be even better. And so now everything's an iteration, everything's a journey, everything's a learning opportunity. So I think that's a really key point to this. Is it isn't by next week your learning department should be a P&L business.
Right.
It's more of how do we move all the parts and get there over time.
Yeah. Yes. 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 Absolutely.
How did you sort of set up or formalize relationships with other business leaders, business stakeholders? Do you have like a committee, a group that meets regularly? Do you have some sort of ongoing communications or anything like that helps you, do the things that you're trying to do?
The people I try to partner with most in all organizations that I go to are the HRBPs, the individuals like the HR directors that partner with different leaders with the organization. And I think that that's such an important group to have great relationships with because they literally have a pulse on what's going on throughout the business. They're supporting all executive leaders. They know what the pain points are. They know what the challenges are. They know what the struggles are. They know what the struggles are of those leaders that they support, where those, the gaps are, and they can really help you be set up for success. And so what I have found is to really move again kind of expeditiously. I like to move fast when I do things, and building those relationships with those individuals first has helped me do that, not only with obvious things that I just shared with you, but also they can connect me to other people who are important too. Who else should be part of this conversation? Who else are they partnering with? Who has built trust with these leaders that I'm going to go try to build trust with and insights with? And so that's why I think that it's really important to have those people 100%
Hmm.
within your circle, and then you continue to build it out from there. Whoever is going to have the biggest influence, whoever is going to be able to either shoot down my project or bless it, I want to either get in next to them through the people that they know or directly with them. And
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time with building relationships as well, really understanding like what is important, what keeps you up at night. What is it that you're trying to accomplish as a leader? And then again, everything I present to them is linking back to that. Yeah, I know you mentioned this. This project that I'm working on is going to fit this need exactly. The other thing that I really, really am intentional on, and we as a group in L&D, this is such a hard thing for us to do, is tie it to results. It's hard. We have
Mm.
so many different soft skills and things like that, but figure it out. And even if you need to partner with those leaders or those HRBPs and saying, how are we going to measure this? If anybody ever asks me for anything, great. What does success look like? How are we going to measure that success? Because I want to bring those results to the table when I'm speaking to my next leader or to highlight and, for the future things I do as well.
Well, and I think that's another thing that comes up in this conversation is, sure, we'd love to do a better job of connecting what we do to outcomes. But L&D teams not having insight into what that is, what does good look like for the business, not knowing where data is. And I just want to talk a little bit about what you mentioned because it's interesting to me that the relationships, because I think very often in this conversation, L&D leaders tend to actually steer away from
Mm,
when you mentioned HR
mm,
leaders, right? They think, well, no, I don't need to know what they know. I need to be connected to the business, right? The
mhm.
leaders of the business. And on the surface, that makes sense, and I hear that a lot, and I wouldn't push back on that. But then here, listening to you, And, every organization is different, but I think you make a valid point that these HR leaders are most likely already plugged in to those various business points that you are looking to get into. And so they can either help do that for you or model that behavior for you. Like, this is how you do it.
Yep.
I think that's a point that gets overlooked because very often, and you can disagree with me or not, but I feel like L&D leaders, they try to distance themselves from anything that's sort of HR related if possible.
Sure.
Because it's like, hey, we're talent, we're development. You guys are, forms and things like that. So
And there
in
can be a
compliance,
lot of butting of heads, and
absolutely,
ideas. I totally get it. What I think is a great thing for us to remember within this is that if we can get on that other side of it and we can build that relationship with those HR teams, not only are they going to help us kind of understand what the problems are, they're invested in the solution. They want you to be successful because if you're successful, if we're successful, then it's going to help their business leaders be successful. And guess who's going to get the credit at the end of the day? Not me, the HRBP who helped facilitate that. And so it's almost like you kind of go into the room and you help people think that they have the greatest idea in the world, but it was your idea, but you have them come up with it. Oh yeah, we can do this session, and you get people excited around that as well.
yeah, okay. No, it's a great point, and I think, like I said, in this desire to be more business focused, the idea of being tied to HR in any way seems antithetical to that, right? For a lot of folks, like, no, they're not part of the business. But I think you're making a very valid point that yes, they are very plugged in most cases. I think most L&D leaders can take a pretty good inventory of their own organization and recognize, is that going to work here or not, right?
Right. And to your point, it is dependent upon the organization because I've worked with some organizations where they're not plugged in, nor maybe they don't have the best relationship. And so I'm not going to say that you should just blindly go out there and build those relationships with this group. Know who they are, know what they bring to the table, know what their respect factor is, because when you're linking yourself to individuals, then you're linking yourself to individuals, right? Whatever they're kind of known for. So it's all about exposure. It's all about the right kind of exposure as well.
Yeah, definitely worth exploring,
Yes.
in
Right.
your own organization. So where I was heading before I wanted to touch on that was about the outcomes with and the results. What have you seen in your own experience about, okay, what does good look like? I mean, it's one thing to say, that, oh, we need people to do this particular thing better, faster, stronger, right? And it's like, okay, you've recognized that need somehow. The business leader has recognized there's need. How did you recognize there was a need? There's something you're looking at that tells you that it's here and I want it here. What is that? So how do you get to the point where can you articulate what that is to me as the learning leader? Or can you point me to where the data is? And so what's that like for you? How do you figure that stuff out?
I love that you said that because that is everything. So the other thing I like to do in organizations, I haven't done it at this one yet, but is I like to build out intake forms. And in that intake form, I ask questions like, what are you looking for? What is the problem? What are you trying to solve for? How do you know this is a problem? How are you going to know if it's solved? What's been tried in the past and why didn't that work?
Mm,
Because the thing about it is, and the most depressing thing about our field is that it's the lack of reinforcement that causes most of the detriment in the things that we do. The
yeah.
Ebbinghaus forgetting curve is such a sad thing to me. The fact that within 2 weeks, if you don't practice what you're doing, you'll forget 83% of what you're learning. And within 2 hours, if you don't practice what you're learning, you're going to forget 50% of what you learned.
Yep.
So it's not the fact that we necessarily need new things. I want to know what we've tried in the past and why it didn't work, because you might be able to revitalize something that's already been implemented, paid for, and you need to kind of build it back up and build in some strategic reinforcement with it. So that intake form kind of helps me understand and makes them think about it. Because if they're just saying, "Oh, I just want this," well, no, we're not order takers. As much as the business would like us to be, sometimes we're not order takers. We're problem solvers. And so help me understand what that is. And within that intake process, I've identified now how I'm going to measure success. And then I can either go back to those, executive leaders or whoever it is and say, here's the project that is being proposed. Here's what we want to work on. And here's the result. Is this worth us investing in? Well, I like that, but I also think that this is a bigger part of that problem. And we've got this coming down here in Q3. And so let's wait for that. And so it just opens up kind of the the depth of what a real problem is. But it starts with understanding what is the problem, how do you know it's a problem, and how are we going to know that it's solved there.
Yeah. I mean, back to that sort of path of least resistance and being an order taker and just taking an intake form at face value. And it seems like, well, I don't want to seem adversarial. This is what they've decided that they want. They've looked at their business. They know what they want. And it's the idea is, well, okay, but if you just do what they ask, what they're asking for, and that doesn't work, then nobody's helped anybody. Whereas if you're able to have that conversation, and maybe it doesn't have to be adversarial by any means, but maybe it prolongs the process a little bit at the front end, but then you're going to get the actual result thereafter. It isn't just this, let's hope for the best, right? We built the best thing we could based on what you told me. And so by definition, it should work. Let's hope so.
Yeah. That is, like you said, it's not going to positively impact anybody. And I wouldn't stretch to say that it's actually more potentially going to negatively impact you because they're not learning professionals. They don't understand what goes into this. They expect results. And if what we put together, even if they ask for it, doesn't work, well, this, you know what, we're going to have to just go ahead and outsource this. We're going to have to go ahead and bring in a consultant. No, that's why
Right.
you want to be bold in standing firm with who you are. You're hired for a reason. You are learning professionals. Stand that ground. Help people understand that by sharing your insights and helping provide a compelling story as to why what you're thinking is going to work even more effectively than what's being brought to the table. Or, like I said, it almost goes back to like, don't just scrap it all. Maybe you help take part of their idea and as a learning professional what you need to do to help make that even more effective.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you're trying to say when it comes back to this whole thing of if you were going to be promoting your business of learning within your organization, the idea is that you don't have to say, well, here's the all of the learning theory behind this and the pedagogy, and it probably doesn't matter to them, right? What you're saying is, here is how I'm going to get the thing that you want. Here's how I'm going to make that thing happen. And the modalities, the engagement, the whatever it is, that's your domain. You're the expert on that, and that's how you live and breathe. Your job is to use all the tools at your disposal to make the thing happen. So it isn't like they come to you and say, "I need a class on this," and it's this many people. And so you're like, well, the only way to do that is this way, and we'll do it. Because yeah, like you said, we're not helping anybody. I mean, let's not say that it never works, right? Clearly,
Yeah, of
it
course.
works a lot, but
Definitely.
it's there's so many missed opportunities to make it better.
Right. Right. Exactly.
What are some of the challenges that you've maybe come across, or that you just want people to be aware of? It might not even be something that you face when you start to really have this mindset about learning, when you start to step out of your comfort zone and you sort of cross whatever imaginary line that is between order taker and strategic, right? And that line isn't in the same place for every organization. But when you step over there, what's are some of the things that either you've faced in your career, or something that that people should be aware of because you see it coming?
It's really comes down to the art of influencing. And I spend a lot of time developing myself around that, influencing and really helping tell a great story. Those are two things I think that learning professionals need to get great at when they think about this. Because let's put it into perspective. And let's say that you're not the head of an organization. If you're the head of an organization, yeah, you're still gonna have to influence. You're gonna have to influence at that, executive level, C level. But let's say that you're reporting to somebody, and those of you who are listening here today, you're reporting to somebody and you need your boss who maybe has asked you to do something in a certain way to completely go against that. Here's some things that they're thinking about, and I'll tell you that just from being at the head of organizations before, is that I'm trusting you and it's my name. If things fail, it's coming down on me. I'm responsible for leading this organization. I'm responsible for having our KPIs be met. I'm responsible for all these things. And so if you're bringing something to the table to me, know that there's kind of some fear that's involved with that as well. Right? I was listening to a book the other day. I won't break away to take a look at the title, but it's really great around communicating with others. And he's a trial attorney, and he says he was speaking to somebody at one trial, and they just lost it. They freaked out on him. They were so rude, and he said immediately, "What I wanted to do is kind of come back to them snappy." But what I remembered is there's something else that's happening underneath that caused them to snap with that. We don't know what it is. So know that when you're getting resistance from maybe your leaders within L&D, that it's not about your idea. Maybe it's about fear. Maybe they've put their neck out on the line before and it failed. Maybe they've gone through layoffs. And if you look at LinkedIn today in today's world and you see people applying for 300 plus positions, the thought of getting out of there and thought of trying something different, that's a scary place to be. So you have to get really great at helping people understand that what you're proposing is not a science experiment. You're proposing something that you've thought through, that you know based off of the skill set you bring to the table is going to help you. And one way that I help leaders get a little bit more comfortable around that is, hey, let's run a pilot. Okay. When you frame
Yes.
it as a pilot, that's a little bit less scary. That means that,
Yes.
hey, at any given time, I can say, okay, pilot's done. Let's go back to the way we were doing it. But 9 times out of 10, after my pilots, that coaching program that I talked to you about at T-Mobile that ended up going internationally started in one call center in Bellingham, Washington, and it
Mm.
spread out across the world, literally. And it was because we presented it as a pilot. I always go pilots first, and I show that success.
Not only that, but then you also get, the benefit of learning from the pilot. Like, all of the things that, if before you go big, you're like, "Oh, well, good thing we ran this pilot because now I can trick this." It isn't just about, well, either the pilot is successful or not. There's all of the learning of going on of this is what it's gonna look like in real life, so now we can actually scale it, and if we hadn't, this little problem could have been huge, and so,
Exactly.
we've solved that,
Absolutely.
so
Right. Yeah,
yeah.
timing, I mean, even a program that I've built out recently, we ran a pilot and I completely took out a whole section that I was going to have in the full model because it wasn't necessary anymore. So
Yeah.
yes, you're 100% correct. It's a learning ground. It's a ground to say, hey, look at these results that we had. You get other people excited about it. When I built out our coaching program at TikTok, within 45 days, we reduced people errors by 82%. You know
Oh,
how excited I was to share that result out with other people within TikTok when I was partnering with them? Again, that was adopted in North America. It was in Latin America. It was in Asia, and it was in Europe. And it was all based off that pilot that we did with those quick results that we were able to accomplish with that as well. So
wow.
pilots are very powerful for many reasons.
That's fantastic. And the other thing that you touched on too is this idea of influence and storytelling. And I think about it. I think maybe a lot of L&D leaders are selling themselves short. This is the field that you are in. This is the field that you are successful in because you are a leader in this field. Um, let's face it, it's a creative field, at least to a large degree compared to some others. And you probably wouldn't be doing it if you weren't good at influencing people and telling stories. So, use that to your advantage, not only to gain the trust and the insight into the business, but then when you are trying to demonstrate learning's impact, that's where the storytelling really comes in. It isn't just here's a spreadsheet that I churned out from our platform. It's here's where we were, here's the problem, here's how we decided to fix that, and here's the things that we encountered along the way, and here's the result, right? You have these stories that you could tell, and yeah, people respond to that much more than simple raw data. You have to be able to connect those dots, and I think we're in a unique position to be able to do that, maybe compared to some other places in the business.
And with how AI can help us these days, to help curate thought process and like, hey, here's the leader that I'm dealing with. Here's the pushback that I received in the past. What are some recommendations you have?
Mhm.
I mean, I wish I had that back in the day.
Right. I mean, I'm definitely not a, all AI all the time kind of guy, but there are certainly some places where to find the story sometimes,
Yes,
and
totally.
it's not a failing of the person to, oh, you can't see the story. We're just talking if you're looking at vast volumes of data and information, a very simple AI tool will be able to help you at least find some key points where you can start to build your story, right? You're not abdicating your skills to this tool. You're using the tool to do the things that you are good at. Yeah, I think finally starting to see the sort of the reality around AI. I know there's still much more to come, but like the idea is that everyone gets very wrapped up in the news stories and the big this and the big that. It's like it's starting to quiet down, and people are like, oh, if I just use this tool to do this thing, oh, that's far better than what I was doing before. And I'm seeing more and more of that, and I'm happy to see that.
Yeah. definitely.
Are you seeing that in your own, workflows or your team's workflows where like, oh, we're leveraging some tools to make things smoother, easier?
Not so much in building things out.
Mhm.
I think, but with like, if I'm working on something, I might say, hey, what would make this even more effective? Here's the approach I'm taking right now. What would make it more effective? And I think that's the best way as learning professionals to utilize AI,
Mhm.
because I think that if you are using it to literally build out your things, it's going to fall flat. One, you don't understand it. Two, it's not going to be it. But I heard a great quote the other day that said, "AI is not going to take your job. A person utilizing AI is going to take your job." And so I think that it's important for us to get in front of it and understand how to use it. And I do use it just to kind of enhance my ideas and use it even
Mhm.
more so like when I build out my own kind of business ideas and figure things out from that end of things. But I think that it's a great partner. Hey,
Yeah.
here's this message I'm sending out to leaders. What would make it even more effective? Things like that.
Yeah, I think there's also an opportunity to use it where you can get subject matter experts who have no ability to impart their knowledge to others. They could
Yes,
use a tool that says they could just knowledge dump into an AI tool, and an AI tool can help to make sense and turn that into usable
absolutely.
learning
Right.
content for
Yep.
sure.
I just wrote an article the other day for a magazine. I had all these different thoughts from my interview that I did with the individual, and I popped it in there, and I was like, "Here's all my general thoughts. Make it pretty." Made it pretty. Success. I did the work. I had the information. It wasn't new information.
Yeah, and I think that's the distinction, right? Because if you sort of try to ask the tool to do these sort of create something, you don't know what you're gonna get.
Oh
And I think
no,
we see example after example after example of hallucinations and incorrect and things like that. So I think the
definitely.
idea of no, the knowledge and information, it exists right here. Let's just do
Mhm.
something with this as opposed to create something brand new. I like that. As you wrap up, I always like to ask just if there's anything that you want to share that's on your horizon in the next, like, say, 6 months that you're working on, something you want to roll out, something you're excited about for your team, anything that you are looking forward to from a work perspective over the next 6 months for you.
I'm just excited to see, now that we have this new people leader onboarding program up in place and what's that experience look like. I think it's such a miss, leaders coming into the organization or even people being promoted in of now what? Now we're up and running. I'm excited to see what our leaders' experiences are, and then how we make it even more effective moving forward. That's what it's always about: is what can we do to stay in front of it? How do we make it even more effective, and celebrate from there. So that's the biggest thing that I'm looking forward to with what I'm working on right now with Western Union, and then things I'm working on outside of it. Just from like a weekend side of things on. Even trying to do like entrepreneurial workshops for like dads and daughters and moms and sons, and just because I think that it's such an important skill, one for youth to really understand, but also just a bonding experience. I'm all about connecting people and always about trying to help them kind of unlock new ways to connect with one another and to help their children feel even more successful.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love to hear that.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, is there where can I find out more about what you're doing there? Because that's something I hadn't heard about from you yet.
Yeah, if you go to myerscoaching.com,
Okay.
there's some information on the daddy daughter workshop that I'm putting together right now. I'm looking at doing one virtually and in person in Colorado, and then the hope is to spread that out as well and do larger events and to give kids more to do than just video games in the summer, or like as a young person to be able to kind of find out within yourself early. Like there's kids that are making millions and millions of dollars off of really passionate, things that they're just doing. So I want to help kids do that.
Well, that's awesome. And I also just to end on, I love that the idea of you looking forward to the results of a program because it comes back to all these things we're talking about. Where if you're only building to like, oh, I hope we get good completion rates and good smile sheets, you're not sitting there every day going, oh, I can't wait till those completion rates come out. Like, who cares, right? But to know that like, oh, we've put all this time and energy to do this thing, and I can't wait to see it happen. I think that's a feeling that is hard to miss, and I think we'll be excited about that's what as a reason to do some of this stuff.
Yeah, and that's when I do like coaching programs and things like that. That's what I love the most. Not only do you see results, because I know how it feels to not get results in an organization. It feels horrible. It feels
Happens.
scary, all these things, right? And so, one, that I know how it makes somebody feel to go from the red to the green. I use that example at TikTok. There was another team, they were in the red, and for the first time in 25 weeks, they were completely in the green. And so it was really exciting to have them have that moment. But what was even greater is he said, not only have I been able to be even more successful at work, he's like, the relationships I have at home with my wife and my kids and being able to talk to them differently. That's what I love about programs that are more holistic and think about the end user in mind. Like, how do you make this a really great experience with your learning and not just learning? Create the experiences, help people feel learning and be able to take it inside of these walls that we're working in, but also to be able to take it and apply it to their lives as well.
That's awesome. I hope this is inspiring to some folks who are listening to it, because I know there's a lot of stuff in there. I appreciate all your time, Matthew, and all your insights, and thank you for spending some time with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of They Learn, You Win, presented by Skooks. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow or subscribe in your podcast player, and follow me, David Wentworth, on LinkedIn. I try to distill what works and what doesn't for L&D leaders so you can stay up to speed on the latest insights, ideas, and tech. See you next time.